Good day everyone and welcome to DokusCore. My name is Dokus and today we're going to discuss update 0.6.4. Before we're going into the update, a disclaimer first. I have not made a YouTube video for quite some time now. That is because that I am currently doing a quick course on full stack development for designing UIs and websites. I'm kind of busy with that at this moment, taking a little bit of time away from the coding itself. Nonetheless, we have done a quite big update for 0.6.4 and we have done some extra updates. It has been pushed to GitHub so you can update the current pre-build. So I'll give you the information on what has been changed on 0.6.4 and I also will briefly give you what we are going to introduce into 0.6.5, but you can, as I said, already download this on GitHub and have it in your current pre-build. So with no further ado, let's go to the update of 0.6.4. So first let's discuss all the changes that has been made into DokusCore. If I go into the editor, then we see a new file called modules.lua. Normally this list would be within the core.lua, but as this list is getting bigger and bigger, it would be better to have that in a separate file. Because of this, all plugins on the last update have been updated. So each and every plugin had an update. That was because we had to load this file into the fx manifest. But as this list is just going to be bigger, it felt naturally to have that in a separate file. We had switched between the red and dark menu from red to dark. That is when we are developing, we often switch between. That is what it's standing on right now. You can of course change that back to red if you want to. In the very first start of DokusCore, we had a function built in into DokusCore for the paychecks. You can see here a file paychecks, but all the code has been uncommented. And right now I am unsure if paychecks will make a comeback. This is because the jobs that we will create later will work in a different way. There is not going to be a X amount of money that you're going to earn automatically by doing completely nothing. If you do want to have this function later on in DokusCore, let us know. If enough people want this function to be there, then we will recreate it. But for now, it does not fit into the economy that we want to create, so thus we have removed it from DokusCore. We have also added a couple new plugins, and therefore we have added the modules and the dialogues to it. For example, the stable ones. So we have now stables in DokusCore. I'll explain more about that in a moment, but the config files have been created. We have updated the chords command, because if you're using this function on one sync, then the chords were not showing up. It was just saying 00 at X, Y, and Z coordinates. The only thing that we had to change was going from player pet to pet ID. Pet ID in DokusCore basically means player pet ID. We have shortened these functions within the native file built into DokusCore. But by doing this change, you are now able to use this command on OneSync. We have added a new command into DokusCore. If I would go to RedM, and I'm standing here now close to this grinder, the stone grinder. So I can do a scenario here. If I open the chat and I type scenario, and it's going to be either start or stop. So I want to say start. And I want to execute a scenario within 2 meters from my character. I hit start and it will now grab the headshot and then it will start to do its animation, start grinding it like that. So if you want the scenario to stop, you simply type scenario stop. It will not just like instantly poof and there you go and you're standing straight up again. It will actually put that thing away. I can show you also a different scenario. So let's say I have been drinking in the bar, I'm quite drunk, I walk outside and let's say right here I want to do that scenario. So if I do a scenario right here, it starts to lean against the wall as if I'm drunk. And you have that. So I also, again here, I can say stop scenario. So let me show you guys one more. So let's say I am here at the graveyard and I walk up to this stone. Again, I do scenario start and it will actually just go to its knees and start grieving at this stone. So depending on where your location is, if you start the scenario, it's completely random. Well, actually not completely random, it depends on the location that you are, what kind of scenario it will execute. But this is a new command you can use in DokusCore for all kind of situations. We have removed duplicate native get chords on the native list that we have in DokusCore. We had a duplication there, we have removed that. We also added the API that holds all the information, that handles all the information for the database, for storing boats, getting boats, basically handling your boats, as we are currently in the process of building the boat plugin. We have also added the API for the stables, so grabbing the horse, storing the horse, and so on. We also introduced a new plugin called Zoning. This is using the Polyzones plugin, so shout out to Polyzones. But we have added the API to handle also the database information for setting, storing, and getting zones. More about the zoning plugin in a moment. The version checker file that will execute whenever you start the server and checks all the plugins and its versions to update you if there is a plugin update has been up to date with the new plugins, and also the missing plugins we have added on the list, so that will now fully execute in your console window. So whenever there is a new update, you will get notified on that. We have removed all the plugins that we are working on at current times from the pre-build. We had plugins like in there like paving. They were standing in the construction folder, and even though they were standing in the core.lua, what is now the modules.lua, that they were getting worked on and they will not give you the result as expected. People were still trying to use it, then got stuck, and then reported a bug report that they got stuck in that plugin. In order to remove this confusion, because we just wanted to show you like, hey, this is what we're working on, but it was not intended to be used, and people were using it, got stuck, made bug reports. So to prevent confusion, we have removed all the plugins that we are working on, and we are now only providing the plugins that are finished, or either they are finished enough that they can be used into the pre-build. Now for the zoning plugin, I first have to say again, big thanks to Polyzones for creating a wonderful plugin that we can utilize in order to build the zoning plugin that we have done. So just for as a non-confusion, Polyzones is making the zones itself. It's basically handling, it's calculating the zones whenever you step into it, out of it, and go on. The zoning plugin that we made, with this, this basically uses Polyzones to create the zone, and then it will execute a event if you are in the zone or out of the zone. So Polyzones handles the zones, and the zoning plugin that we made ourselves is actually executing the event. So what the zoning plugin does is you can build a zone with it directly, and you can debug the zone, and then once you're done, the zoning plugin will load it up into the database, and then from the database it will run these zones. With the zoning plugin, we are able to create two loops, one for checking if you're in a zone, one if you're out of a zone, and this will then work for all plugins. Right now, all plugins have their own distance check, so each and every plugin is checking your character coordinates against a set of coordinates, for example for an NPC, for a building, or whatever. This is now completely going over to the DokusCore zones, and this one single loop will check all the zones at once, so you don't have that separate in each plugin. This is for reducing the CPU usage for your clients, for your players on the server. and thus they will also receive a better FPS. The zoning plugin that we made is it's kind of complex. It requires a separate video to be fully explained, but to show you what it does, I am going to quickly give you a view on it. So if I go to the editor, you can see here there is a folder called Docus Zones. It is empty. So if we now go to RedM, and only admins can do this, by the way. So if we go to RedM and we hit left alt, admins will see the start zoning Z. So if I hold Z, now you can see Docus Zones is active. This is what the zoning does. This is actually built into the core menu, but this works again with the zones plugin, and the zones plugin again works with polyzones, and polyzones is directly added into DokusCore framework itself, so you do not need to download that as a separate dependency. But right now it says space to start, so if I hit start, it creates this first line. So let me quickly go around the building, and now I hit E to add a new line. So we're just basically going to create a box. When you are having created the zone, you cannot edit it yet, but what we're going to do is hit F. It says zoning complete, and then it gives us that a file is created inside the Docus Zones. So let's go back to the editor, and then in the editor, if I now open Docus Zones, you will see here there is a file. So these are the four corners, the vectors, and then the upper and lower z-axis. So what do I do with this? What I would do with this is I would go to the zones plugin, and first and foremost we are going to set debug to true, because if we don't, it checks for the zoning.lua file, and if there is one and the information is edited, then it will delete the zoning.lua file and then push it to the database. So right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this zoning default, and now I have the zoning.lua. So type is a zone, it's not an NPC interaction. The name is the gun store, and let's call this test because I already have it. The city is Valentine, and we want to see the polyzone grids, we want to see the poly grids, and the grid density is 30. Now here in event, we basically going to say what we are going to do whenever we are entering the zone. This is options that we have added into polyzones. This was not originally with polyzones, but we have added it into it, so we were able to create this zoning plugin that actually executes the events. So the first parameter is going to be client or server, depending on what kind of event you want to trigger. And then we, for example, say DokusCore gunsmith. No, it's actually gun store, and then we say enter store. And the same thing for the exit. These are mandatory to fill in. So you have enter store and exit store. So now we have added that in, we also need to add in the zones. So let's grab the vectors that we created from that file and add it into here. There is also a bottom and a top z-axis, but I'm not going to fill them in right now so you can see what it does. But if I go now to RedM and I restart the plugin, you can see that there is a box right here. If I walk in, the NPC is not greeting me anymore. The moment you are in debug mode, the other zones are disabled. This I have done, for example, if you change the grid density and you up it too much, you can crash the whole server. At least you crash the clients, and you don't want to have that. So if you're going to do this, especially on a live server, we deactivate all the zones that you normally have, and only the zones that you have in the config file for the zoning.lua will be activated. You can also see here I left the zone and I are in the zone, left the zone. But that's basically how it works. Right now what I can do is if I go to the editor again, I can, for example, I want to say that this one goes to 0. If I go back to RedM and I restart, you can see now that this first corner went inside to the building. So basically right now you can debug your zone until you're satisfied with it, and then you can upload it to the database. Now, I did not add in the z-axis yet. I left that uncommented. Why is that? Because if I do that, then what I have made in a default is that it takes the waste, I mean the z-axis, the 0 z-axis. It's not actually the 0 z-axis, but the z-axis that it gives you. If I show you that in the editor, it's right now 118.53 at low and 119.5 at high. That is your waist. It's the middle of your character. So what I have done in RedM is that it goes one below, so one z-axis below. So my minus z-axis was 118, so I set it to 117 automatically, and then 2 above. So if you can see here these green lines are one axis, so that's 1.0 z-axis. So it goes 1 below and 2 above from this one. So 1, 2, and above the red line is 2. So that is what that is doing. If I would go back to the editor, and I would say that I'm going to set this myself. So let's say that 118.0 is my minus axis, and let's say 119.0 is my upper axis. If I go back now to RedM and I restart the zoning plugin, you can now see that the grid became like this. You can have it like this, it will still work, but if you want to encapsulate the character completely within the box, then you are going to either leave it at default, or you are going to set this to appropriate value. For this one, it would be 121. And then we have a nice box where we want to have it. Whenever you're done and you're satisfied with that box, what you're going to do is, if we're going back to the editor, then we go into the config, and the only thing is we're going to set debug from true back to false. Whenever we restart the plugin, it gets pushed into the database. So let me first show you the database. If I would go now to the zones table, I have here stables, zone, NPC, and then you see the gun store and the gun catalog. But there is no gun store test at this right moment. So if I am going, so you can see right now it's we're going to set this back to false, and if in RedM I'm going to restart the zone, you can still see that the green lines are here, and I actually get welcome this time, and you can see the upper box. That is because we have left it on for in the database. So if we are going to the database and we refresh, there is now here the gun store test. And if I go look in the editor, the zoning file plugin for Lua file is now again saying it's not saved. So I'm just going to say don't save, because it's removed. It's removed because it's inserted into the database. The file gets automatically deleted, and of course you can then duplicate the default file again if you want to add a new zone. So in the database, it says that we have a grid density of 30, poly 1, grid 1, this is the minus and z-axis, and then we have, of course, what we need to do on enter, what we need to do on exit, and the vectors. So in order to not see the box anymore, we can set poly and grid to 0, and then if we go back to RedM and we restart, the box disappears. Now you can see here that the grid density coverage is 90. What Polyzones recommends to between 80 and 90. So if we go back to the database, you can just, for example, set this to 20, save it, then we go back to RedM and we just restart the plugin. Right now the coverage is 84, what is well between 80 and 90, and that will preserve CPU usage. So this is basically what it does. It now recognizes whenever you are in or out a zone, and that will prompt the NPC from reacting. Normally there was a circle around the NPC, and then you would, for example, if the circle was too big, you could stand here, for example, and the NPC would greet you because you're getting in the range of the NPC. now we can actually define the borders. Not all plugins are made yet to work with this new zoning plugin, but in a matter of time we will convert these plugins to work with the zoning plugins too. For more information about the zoning plugin, how we're creating zones, how we are adding events to it, and how you can completely and fully tweak it with all information up and on it, I have to make a video for that separately. That is a video that will be in the making soon, but this is a quick view on how the zoning plugin works. Next up is the stables. The stables finally reached DokusCore. We have been asked for it quite some times, and we are happy to announce that the stables have now made their way to DokusCore. First of all, we have to give big thanks to Key Value and Clandestino, I hope I don't butcher your name, for making this wonderful UI that we are utilizing inside the stable plugin for DokusCore. We did, however, change the UI a little bit, and the code behind it has completely been changed, and it works in a different way, what I'm going to show you in a bit. So switching to RedM, if I now walk into the stable, I get greeted by the NPC, and if I then walk up to the NPC, I get this menu. So I can open it, get this camera view up to the stable, and the stables is completely filled with horses. If you walk out of the stable, all the horses will be cleaned up to make sure that you don't have too much entities on your game engine. But I have here my own horse. I can click on show my horse. But let's say I want to buy another horse. So let's say I buy this American Splash White. So I click on buy. Let's call it something. Let's call it Betty. Now we have successfully named the horse Betty. And we just wait for the camera to pan back. There we go. So now he's saying that my horse is ready and was doing a pleasure doing business with you. So I can open the menu and now actually get the horse. And this is done in a very unique way. So I have now here, I have Blubber and I have Betty. So let's say I want to get Blubber. These options here right now don't work yet. So later on you will be able to rent out your horse. If you have multiple horses and there are people that are unable to afford a horse, they can still rent your horse in order to have a transport, and they will pay you a fee for it. Horses will have a temper, so eventually if you don't treat your horse well, if you don't feed it or give it a drink on time, things like that, the temper of your horse will change, the bonding will change, and eventually your horse becomes stubborn and wild again, and you have to set the train again. So some horse trainer can come and get your horse to train. You can set on daily care. If you set on daily care, right now it says $1 per day, but what it does is, like, when you stable your horse, it stables it for safety, but it doesn't really care for the horse. So you have to go to the horse, take it out, take it for a ride, give it some feed, give it some water, and then stable it again. But if you don't have the time or you're going offline for a couple of days, you can turn on daily care, and then the stable will take care of your horse, maintains the horse, and make sure it's always ready to go whenever you need to. You can sell it against 50% of the price and take your horse. The three options that are working right now is show horse, take horse, and sell horse. The other three will be made in a later version. So let's say I'm gonna take this horse. We wait for the camera to pan back, and the NPC is now actually going to fetch my horse. So I'm just gonna stay here and wait. The moment those doors open, you can see it's behind it. Oh, actually you don't see it right now, but there is my horse. The NPC will walk to it, and then he will climb onto the horse and bring it to me. This is also the same way how you stable the horse. You put it close in an area, I think it's 20 meters. Here you go, as healthy as it ever was. The horse, as I said, does have a temper, so right now it really just does not like me to climb up on it. But once you're on it, he will start to calm down eventually, and you know how that works with RedM and horses. If I now want to stable my horse, I can just, as I said, you need to have it in a range of at least 20, I think it was 20 meters. And now you have an extra option, it's called store horse. If I'm going to click that one, then the NPC is going to walk up to the horse, climb on it, and he drives it back. Behind there, he steps off on, and he walks back. Now the horse stays there for a little while. The moment the NPC goes back to its original position, and he turns around, the horse gets deleted, and then he turns around, and you can now start using it again. There is still a couple little bugs that we have to iron out with the menu, with the camera, when you use it multiple times in a row. But that's going to be fixed in future updates. For now, at least, you can buy your horse, take your horse and everything. The horses will get refreshed whenever you open or close the menu. And as I said, whenever you walk out the stable, the horses will get deleted. As you see now, the stables are empty. This is to make sure that we don't have a lot of entities on the map eventually hitting your limit on the pool size. That is also something that we will do with NPCs later. So if you are not closing the area, they will disappear and clean up, so they're not being rendered the whole time on the game engine. So if I walk out, horses will of course disappear, and yeah, that's how the stable works for now, and more will be added to it in the future. The spawner plugin had a couple patches too. Right now it basically checks if you are logged in with at least character ID 1, 2 or 3. If not, it kicks you back to the multi-character screen in order to make sure that you are actually logging in with a valid character. Also, what has been fixed is whenever you choose a character, the ID was not always properly set, prompting you the error that you have, like you have a character on ID 0. What you had to do is you had to click on your character again, sometimes a couple of times, before it actually set it, the ID. It was a little scripting mistake that we had done in HTML. I found it and it has been fixed, and the update has been pushed. So if you could already have it in your server. It is not necessarily released in 0.4, but it was a patch that we have done after. We have also added in a couple extra options in the cutscene. So whenever you are created a character and you are in the stagecoach going to either Saint Denis, Blackwater or Valentine, you can now toggle the music on and off. You can change the view so that you are sitting in the stagecoach itself, so you can change the cinematic view. And we also added the button, the E button, that is normally the button to step out the coach. We have added that in just to prevent you from stepping out. Otherwise, we had to disable the prompt, but for some reason it did not always wanted to disable the E key, and you would still be able to step out. If you would step out, you would not reach your end destination, thus you will be stuck in this cutscene. And the stagecoach itself will also not be cleaned up. So we have added the extra prompt E to prevent you from stepping out of the stagecoach whenever you are in the cutscene. So the cutscene now has an option to toggle the music and also an option to switch the cinematic view. The script bundle also got 2 extra scripts, and with thanks to Theodore. If I am going to RedM, and what Theodore has done is he added 2 scripts. One is to express fear. So if I type in the chat fear, my character will do this animation. And you can stop that again with fear. He will just stop the animation. Furthermore, the command dance you can use whenever you do that. This prompt menu pops up. Right now I have dance 1 selected, so if I hit space, my character start doing dance number 1. I can say U to stop, and then the menu also disappears. But what I can do, for example, if I would do page up, I can say I want to have dance 2, hit space. Now it does dance 2. So let's go, I want to go back to dance 1, hit space, and he switches the way he tenses. So you can choose a couple dances. I think there are 10 right now. So you have 10 different ways you can dance right now in DokusCore. So thanks Theodore for that nice plugin. For data sync, we had before we had the plugin Safeguard, and Safeguard was also checking if you were dead or alive. We had built this function into data sync, and as we are not using Safeguard at the moment anymore, this was redundant. So the loop was still running, eating up resources, but we were not using it anymore. So that has been deleted from the data sync plugin. Also, we have removed the bank money and bank gold parameters from data sync, as the banks are now separate and it's not just one bank account. These options became deprecated and have been removed. The core menu also got a couple changes. So here in RedM, I'm on my horse, I have a map marker set, and if I now do left alt, then you will see here that I have the option auto move. I can use it and then the horse will start moving to your marker. Now this is a feature in development and it's not completely working correctly yet. We did put it in the core already, so you can test it out, see how it works. We have to test it a little bit more too. But as you can see here, it ignores the paths. It does not take the route, where if we would do this on a stagecoach, it does work. So we have to find out why it actually does. Sometimes it even steps off the horse and steals a different horse because the native is go to coordinates at all means necessary or something like that. And stepping off the horse and stealing a horse seems to be within that native being all means necessary. So we are still working on it. Whenever you do activate it, it's going to be cinematic view. And if you want to stop it, you can just hit left alt again, and then it would say stop auto move. It will turn off cinematic view and the horse stops walking. Some other small mentions on plugins. As said in the beginning, we have set the module list in a new file, and therefore we had to update all the plugins manifests with this new file in it. So we are loading a new file into each plugin in order for you to enable or disable it. The characters, the time that it takes between the skin and the clothing to load has been increased to prevent that the character loads naked in the multi-character screen. It can still happen because all these calculations are done client-sided. So if your computer is not that fast, it could be that the clothing still fails to load on your skin, and it has to do that the skin takes too long to load. So that can still happen, but we have increased the time, I think, to 7 seconds, so that your character has time to load in their clothing correctly. So whenever you're on the campsite and your characters are walking in and taking a seat, they will be clothed correctly. We also have fixed the character ID 0 whenever you try to get into the server and you pick your character. So you cannot have character ID 0 anymore. We have removed the error message, and you will now correctly log into the server with the ID that you select in the menu at first time. So you don't have this error anymore you're unable to join the server because your character is not getting set from character ID 0 to 1 or 2. Now also some couple quick mentions about the patches that we have done in between. This will be released for a version 0.6.5 pre-built, but you can already download them on GitHub. What we have changed is the following. We have added a fade for the music. So whenever the music stops, it normally was stopping abruptly. Right now it fades in 100 steps, so it takes a couple of seconds for it to fade away slowly. We have reduced the wait between the NPC spawn and the NPC skin loading. So we were waiting a little longer for the NPC to spawn and then the skin. And then of course, whenever the skin is loaded, the clothing. The time between spawning the character and the skins has been decreased, as we found out that we didn't have to give it that long of a time. For the characters also, we have predefined the camera snap angles. Normally the characters had to sit down and you had to wait ages for this menu to pop up. This was to ensure that all characters were seated, and that because the camera angles were taken the moment the character is sitting. So if your PC would act a little slower at that right moment and it takes a little longer for the characters to sit, and the camera would take their snaps, then you can, like, the camera doesn't pan on the character correctly. We have now taken the coordinates of where the cam supposed to be, so that the cam snap angle is always the same. It doesn't matter how your character is standing at that right moment. So for that, we can also give you the menu much faster. We have turned back on the music player within the character screen, because now that the music fades out whenever you've chosen your character, it doesn't abruptly stop, so it is a lot nicer to use again. It was originally already made in the plugin, but we turned it off because of this abrupt stop of the music. Now that is fixed, we turn the music back on, but you can always turn it off if you want to in the config. For the skin creator, we have added the checks to make sure that all required components of the character body are selected. So if you did not select a torso, a head, legs, eyes and hair, then you would not be able to create a character, because we were getting reports often that the character was invisible. And that is because the character that you see in the skin creator is a dummy. It's not you. You actually have to select the body components. Normally you would not have a character visible up there at all. You would just select the components, and you would, for example, if you would start with the head, you would just have a floating head with no body. And then you select the body, then you select the legs, and that's how you make your character complete. I didn't like that way, so what I done is I set a default NPC character up there that is naked, that you can then change. But often people will just fill in their name and hit continue. But then the system does not have any default components for your skin to load, and thus your skin will be loaded. Transparent, you could say, there is no skin. So you would be having floating clothing. We have now added the checks in so that you are unable to proceed through this menu if you did not select the correct components first. So no more invisible skins. And that basically wraps it up for version 0.6.4. If you liked the video, then please thumbs up and subscribe, as 100 subscribers we need to get a custom YouTube URL. If you want to support DokusCore in a different way, boosting the Discord server would be one. You can also create plugins on DokusCore for it to expand, but most of all, the most important thing that you can do for us is sending us a bug report if you find any bugs. And if you do so, try to find where the bug is originating. If you're able to do that, try to do that. Try to give us as much details as possible. The more details that we have, the faster we can find the bug and tackle it. Other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed this new update. Have yourself a great midday, evening, morning or night, depending on your location, and we will see each other in the next video.